Most of you probably don't know how I became disabled, so here's my story. Everything changed on October 7th, 1998. I was only 4 years old at the time. Here's a picture of me a few months before that date. I left that night to go with my two older brothers, Ryan and Kyle, and my dad to Wednesday night church. My mom stayed home that night as she was so worn out from the day's activities. I remember she kissed each one of us as we went out the door that night. The last thing I remember on the ride over was reading a Christmas catalog with my brother Kyle, trying to figure out what I wanted. On the way to church that night, I fell asleep, and during my nap, a teenager in the oncoming lane drove off the curb of the road a little bit, and as they were trying to get back on, they overcorrected into our lane and hit our van head on. Here are a couple pictures of our van taken at the scene of the wreck. As a result of the impact, I ended up with a C1 complete spinal cord injury that rendered me unconscious and paralyzed. The doctor described that my shoulder belt and lap belt that I was wearing held me in place, but that my head was still trying to go forward, which resulted in my spinal cord injury. To put this in perspective, this is roughly the same area of the spinal cord that Christopher Reeve injured after his fall. I also had lacerated intestines, badly bruised lungs, and a broken right forearm. This is a picture of me taken only 13 days after the wreck. My dad ended up with a gashed right knee and severely sprained right ankle. My oldest brother Ryan fractured his wrist, broke both ankles, and broke his left hip and pelvis. During all of this, my older brother Kyle's seatbelt gave way, and he flew from his seat, ending up underneath the seat in front of him. The responding officers didn't find him until the second pass-through of our van. He broke his ribs, lacerated his liver, bruised his lungs, broke both legs, sustained movement between his C1 and C2 vertebrae, which didn't move far enough to paralyze him, thankfully, and had blood at the base of his brain. Later that night, my mom was notified and was driven to the hospital by a neighbor, as she was too shaken up to drive. When she got there, she was taken to see my older brother Ryan and my dad. My parents were notified that my older brother Kyle, as well as myself, were in the PICU, or Pediatric Intensive Care Unit. My parents weren't told this at the time, but the hospital staff was worried I wouldn't make it through the night. Right after the wreck, I was paralyzed from the neck down. This means that I couldn't do anything. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't talk, I couldn't do anything. Everything I did either required someone's assistance or something's assistance, because I was helpless. A couple days later, my parents were approached by the doctors, and they were asked whether or not they should continue with my treatment, or whether or not they should pull the plug. You see, at the time, I was completely paralyzed, there wasn't anything I could do, and they weren't sure about how far I would recover, or if I would recover. They didn't know what type of quality of life I would have. They just weren't sure about my future. So they wanted to know from mom and dad whether or not they should continue on or simply stop my life support and just let me go. The doctors left, and my parents, they were very overwhelmed, so they went to God in prayer. They prayed that they didn't know what to do, but that they wanted me alive, but that if it was time for me to go, then God would have to take me. These same doctors were later asked what they would have done in my parents' decision, and not one had an answer. As of the shooting of this video, I am now 22 years old, and it's been 17 years since the accident. I've recovered a lot, you know. I'm not exactly where I was before things, but things are a lot more manageable now, and I'm not on death's door every day. And, you may be going through something similar right now. You may have just had an injury, a life changing injury like mine was, and you may be confused right now. And I'm not going to look at you right now and tell you that you're just going to spring up out of the hospital tomorrow like nothing ever happened. You may not recover at all. You may go all the way. Or you may get somewhere in between. But the important thing to know is that when you're going through hell, keep going. I didn't get this way overnight. It's taken me 17 years. I put in a lot of work into the therapy. I put in a lot of prayer. You know, I wouldn't be here without God's healing. So it's not an easy process. It's a long way. But I'm here to tell you that there is life after a disability. So for any of you out there up against the odds, take heart and know that there are people like me that have broken the mold that statistics have made for us. And if you want to see more videos like this, throw a like my way, and I'll see you next time.